G'day, I'm Nate Wegford. I'm your masculinity and mindset coach. Today I'm going to be talking about victim mentality and how damaging this can be to your personal path of evolution and growth. See, when we begin to place others as being responsible for anything and everything that goes wrong in our life, we give our power to that external catalyst. And these events often happen to teach us something that will help our souls to grow and evolve. But when we confuse the teacher for the lesson, and when we fail to see the lesson, what we do is we create more separation. And this is not to justify or make light of the fact that bad things can happen and that bad things may have happened to you. That's not the case at all. It's about turning a painful experience or event into something that empowers you going forward. See, there are disastrous and terrible things that happen. You know, everything from serious physical harm and injuries to emotional abuse and everything in between. And if those traumatic events are left to fester and not looked at to be healed, then they will take over and rule our lives, and it becomes a life-defining moment in a very limiting way. You see, I'll tell you this story by way of analogy. So I heard this story about these twin brothers that were raised by an alcoholic and abusive father. One of the brothers ended up in jail. The other brother ended up succeeding and thriving significantly, became a multi-millionaire. And so the story goes, a researcher was interviewing these men after a period of time, every 10 years or so, trying to find out the role of trauma and how it impacts on people's lives. And so the researcher ended up visiting one of the brothers in jail. He asked the brother in jail, "Why do you think you're in here?" He goes, "Well, how could I not be with an abusive father and an alcoholic father like I had? You know, that was just the context I grew up in, and so this is where I ended up." Now, he asked the same question of the brother who became a very successful millionaire. And he said to him, "So how did you end up, this millionaire who accomplished so much despite experiencing so much trauma in your childhood?" He said, "Well, how could I not have? There's no way that I wanted to perpetuate that suffering in my life for the rest of my life. So it gave me the fuel, the motivation, the desire and drive to create an environment, an outcome that was not like the one I grew up in." And this is obviously, this has such a significant bearing on how we choose to interpret the life events in terms of how it will impact upon our future. And this is not, as I mentioned before, excuse, diminish any single life event or circumstance that may have hurt us. It's to draw attention about how we choose to respond to the events that hurt us. We can either choose to be the person who's in power of our future and the unfolding present in how we wish to live our life and what we choose to make of ourselves, or we can choose to be the victim and let the events that have hurt us and caused us pain in the past to continue to rule over us. The same can be said about people as much as events. When we choose to blame our parents, when we choose to blame someone who's hurt us emotionally, physically, someone who's taken our money, someone who's cheated on us, and we let that poison, that pain of that wound stay in our body through our unwillingness to forgive, through our unwillingness to grow, through our unwillingness to look within and see what elements within us were receptive to that event or in some way invited that event. Now, I'm not saying that we choose consciously for ourselves to experience harm at all. As I said, I have great compassion to anyone who's gone through any sort of trauma. What I'm saying is, often when there's repeating cycles of behavior within a family system, from grandparents to parents to children, it's because there's some pattern of trauma within that family that needs to be resolved. And it often happens when there's family secrets, when the parents haven't healed the trauma with their parents and they pass it on to their children in a way, or the child chooses to take on the trauma of the parent in a futile attempt to try and heal that parent's trauma. Now, this is a reality when you start to look at family constellations. And as I said, it's not to justify wrongdoing to another at all. The opposite, we're trying to interrupt the patterns of suffering that are passed down from one generation to the next. And this happens through self-awareness. This happens with a willingness to speak up, a willingness to seek counsel, to seek the guidance of someone who's proficient in this area, and to build ourselves into a powerful, resourceful, and intentional creator of our reality that has moved beyond the limiting and traumatic experiences of our life that have kept us weak, in fear, and keep showing up from time to time. Now, the perception might be that these events are just happening to you. And my invitation here is to say yes, and why you specifically? And again, this is not about blame or justification. I don't believe in just random events and experiences. What I have come to see, having looked many times and dealt with literally multiple hundreds, but maybe close to 1,000 people over the last 15 or so years, is that often there's a past life experience that's showing up again in this person's life. So last life, you may have been the perpetrator. This time you're the victim, as an example. When you start to look at ourselves as a spirit, as a non-physical being having a life experience, when you start to see that there's a continuity of life and you go from one lifetime to the next, that there is a divine order and a harmony, and there is the possibility of resolving karma, and there is the ability to see beyond the physical into the traumatic events that have shaped our past in this life, including our childhood and past lives, and that when we are able to observe those traumas, we are able to bring resolution to them and create a new life experience in the present moment, such that the rest of our life unfolds in a powerful and meaning and healthy and harmonious way. So hear my message clearly. I'm saying that to create a safer future, we need to look at the traumas of our past, both in our childhood and past lives, and resolve them such that we don't perpetuate them into our future or pass them on to our children in some capacity. And a lot of this, especially when it comes to devotional suffering obligations, where the children take on the pain and suffering of their parents, it's done out of love. The child is trying to rescue or save the parent in some capacity for what the parent has failed to heal within themselves. So this isn't about blaming parents. This isn't about putting trauma on another. This isn't about, an eye for an eye. This isn't about, justifying trauma against another. No, if you're a healthy, honorable man, you would never take your trauma, your pain out on another. And what I'm also saying is sometimes these events happen from what is unconscious. And it often comes from people who are unwilling to look at themselves, who become the perpetrators because they are under-resourced, because they haven't dealt with their own traumas, because they haven't taken action on seeking support and guidance from someone who can help to resolve those traumas, and they continue to perpetuate that suffering for themselves and on the people around them. What I'm inviting is a resolution of the underlying motivators, the drivers to the perpetuation of suffering that we bring upon ourselves and others. That's my motivation in what I'm sharing here. And it requires you to take full responsibility for your life and your life circumstances, including the times you've hurt people in the past, and also pattern interrupting and not recreating patterns which could cause harm in the present moment or in the future. So for that, if you find yourself and also take full responsibility as a man. If you, in your overwhelm, have lashed out in some way, been physical, caused harm, broken trust, abandoned someone out of fear, betrayed someone, anything like that, you need to take full responsibility and to create resolution, and both as best as you can with that person, if you did, through an apology, through making it good in some way, but also, as I mentioned, to address the underlying subconscious motivators or childhood traumas or past life experiences that in some way became supportive as a catalyst towards this perpetuation of this traumatic and suffering experience. If you continue to create them, you need to get to the root cause to prevent them from happening again. And this would be my wish for you. So what I desire is to live in a society and community with healthy men that create safety, that look within, that resolve their traumas, that pattern interrupt the perpetuation of any passing down of trauma to their children, and are willing to create safety and well-being for those people around them. And if this is you, then I'd love you to join the Southern Brotherhood community. The details are in the captions below this video. And if you'd like support in healing your subconscious traumas, past life experiences, limiting beliefs, any devotional suffering obligations from childhood, maybe now you've got a bit more insight into what those things are, then I'm your man. I'm a coach. I've worked and trained in NLP for the past 15 or so years. I've worked with literally hundreds of people in resolving these subconscious blocks and traumas. And I can definitely offer a valuable resource in your trajectory. If you feel that we could be a fit, please reach out to me. There's an opportunity to have a call with me if something resonates with you. Thanks again for watching this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.